My name is Claire Thompson, and I'm 32 years old. When I tell you that family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife, I mean it. I used to believe that blood meant loyalty, that no matter what storms we faced, we would stand together. But after my father passed away, I learned the hard way that greed could turn family into predators. I grew up in a modest but beautiful home on the edge of town. My dad had bought the place when I was just a toddler. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, a two-story house with faded blue shutters, a wraparound porch, and a garden my mom used to fill with roses every spring. After my mom died, it was just Dad and me. He poured his love into keeping that house standing, even when money was tight, even when the roof leaked during storms. "This place is your anchor, Claire," he'd tell me. "No matter what happens in life, you'll always have this to come back to." Those words stayed with me long after he was gone. But what I didn't expect was how quickly my cousins would circle like vultures when he passed. It started small. A week after the funeral, I noticed things shifting. My cousins, Mark and Jenny, suddenly took an unusual interest in the house. Mark would say things like, "Wow, this place is bigger than I remembered," while running his hand along the banister like he already owned it. Jenny would peek into rooms and comment, "Oh, this could make a perfect nursery if we ever decided to expand our family." I brushed it off as their way of reminiscing, but deep down, something unsettled me. You see, Mark and Jenny had always been the kind of relatives who believed they were entitled to more. They grew up spoiled, given every gadget, every trip, every dollar they asked for, while I stayed behind, helping Dad fix the car or repaint the fence. They were never close to him. Yet at the funeral, they cried the loudest, hugging people they hadn't spoken to in years, pretending to carry grief they hadn't earned. After the service, when everyone had gone home, I stayed behind to tidy up the house. That's when I saw it. Mark's jacket tossed carelessly on the couch, Jenny's shoes kicked off by the door. They had made themselves comfortable, and I wasn't even sure when they'd left. At first, I told myself they were just trying to be supportive. But one evening, when I came back from work, I unlocked the door and heard laughter echoing through the hall. I froze. The television was on, my kitchen smelled of takeout, and there they were, Mark sprawled on the couch, Jenny scrolling on her phone, both of them acting like they belonged. "Oh, hey, Claire," Jenny said casually, not even looking up. "We figured it'd be easier to stay here for a while instead of driving back and forth." I stood there, stunned. "Stay here? What are you talking about?" Mark grinned, leaning back with his arms spread wide across the couch. "You've got the space. Besides, family should stick together, right? Dad always wanted us to be close." His words hit like a slap. My dad had wanted closeness, yes, but not like this. Not through invasion. Not through entitlement. Still, I was too tired to argue that night. I dropped my bag, went upstairs, and told myself it was temporary. Maybe they needed time. Maybe grief made people act strange. But days turned into weeks, and soon it wasn't just Mark and Jenny. Their two kids were running through the halls, leaving sticky fingerprints on the walls Dad had painted by hand. Jenny filled the fridge with groceries I hadn't bought, rearranging the shelves like it was her kitchen. Mark parked his truck in Dad's old spot in the driveway. They even brought over boxes, clothes, dishes, toys, and stacked them in the spare room. I tried to speak up, but every time I did, Jenny would smile sweetly and say, "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Claire. We're family. This is our home, too." No matter how many times I corrected her, she kept saying it. Our home. I barely recognized the place anymore. My sanctuary, my father's legacy, was becoming their playground. One evening, after working late, I came home to find Jenny hosting her friends in the living room, wine glasses clinking on the coffee table my dad built. My heart pounded in my chest. I walked past them without a word, climbed the stairs, and locked my bedroom door. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own house. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, fighting tears, anger boiling under my skin. Every memory of Dad, every word he'd spoken about the house being my anchor, replayed in my mind. I couldn't let them take that away from me. I wouldn't. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. I came downstairs in my robe, hair messy, craving nothing but coffee. Mark was sitting at the table, sipping from my favorite mug. Jenny was standing at the stove, flipping pancakes. And then, Mark looked up at me with a smirk and said, "So, Claire, we've been thinking it'd make sense if you moved out. I mean, you're single, no kids. This house is big, and we need the space." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Excuse me?" Jenny chimed in cheerfully, like it was the most reasonable suggestion in the world. "Yeah, you could get a nice little apartment downtown. This place is perfect for us. It's practically already ours." That was the moment. The betrayal I had tried to excuse, the patience I had stretched thin. It all snapped. I looked at them, at their smug, entitled faces, and something inside me hardened. They thought they could erase me from my own life. They thought they could laugh while pushing me aside. But what they didn't know, what they never even considered, was that my father had seen through them long before I did. I had the deed. I had the will. And I had the power to end their little game. That morning, while they laughed and ate pancakes in my kitchen, I walked back upstairs, pulled out the envelope I had tucked away in my drawer, and ran my fingers across the official papers. My hands trembled, not with fear anymore, but with determination. They thought I was powerless. But soon, they'd learn that I was my father's daughter. And I was about to remind them whose name was written on that deed. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the house reminded me of them. My cousins downstairs, sprawled out like they owned the place. Their voices echoed in my head, repeating those words. "You should move out. This house is ours." I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, gripping the deed in my hands. The paper felt like armor. My father's handwriting scrawled across the margins of the will. For Claire. She kept this home alive when no one else cared. Those words were my reminder that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't selfish for wanting to protect what was mine. By morning, my exhaustion had curdled into resolve. I made myself coffee, dressed in a clean blouse and slacks, and drove straight to my father's lawyer. The office smelled of leather and old books. Mr. Whitman had been my father's attorney for years, a man with a gravelly voice and kind eyes hidden behind thick glasses. When I explained what was happening, that my cousins had moved into my house without permission, his eyebrows shot up. "They moved in?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "Boxes, furniture, everything," I said, my voice cracking. "They even suggested I move out. Like I'm the guest here. They keep saying it's our home. Like my dad left it to them, too." Mr. Whitman folded his hands together, studying me carefully. "Claire, listen to me. You are the sole heir. Your father's will is airtight. They have no legal claim here. If they are occupying your home against your wishes, you have every right to remove them." I nodded, but my stomach churned. I don't want to cause a scene, but I can't keep living like this. They're tearing the place apart. They're acting like they're doing me a favor just by letting me stay. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were blank eviction notices. "This is your first step," he said. "We'll file it formally if needed, but sometimes serving notice is enough to make people rethink their actions. You need to take control, Claire. Otherwise, they'll drain you dry." I stared at the papers, my hand trembling slightly as I touched them. Evicting my own cousins. The thought made my chest ache. But then I thought of my father's voice, of the laughter in my kitchen that wasn't mine, of Jenny rearranging my fridge, of Mark smirking as he told me to move out. My hesitation burned away. When I left Mr. Whitman's office, the folder pressed against my chest like a shield, I knew there was no going back. Back at the house, I found Jenny lounging in the living room, scrolling on her phone, and Mark outside tinkering with his truck. Their kids were sprawled on the floor with toys. It looked like a picture of comfort, like they had been here forever. My jaw tightened. Jenny glanced up, her smile sugary sweet. "Oh, Claire, you're back early. We were just talking about painting the upstairs. Don't you think a light gray would brighten it up?" I clenched the folder in my hand. "Don't touch the walls," I said firmly. Her smile faltered. "What? This isn't your house to paint." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she kept her voice soft. "Claire, come on. We're family. We're making it nice for all of us. Why are you being so uptight?" Before I could respond, Mark walked in, wiping grease off his hands. He smirked at me the same way he had at breakfast. You look tense. Maybe you should take a few days off. Go somewhere, clear your head. We'll keep things running here. Something inside me snapped, but instead of shouting, I smiled coldly. Actually, you're right. Things are about to change around here. Just not the way you think. I walked upstairs, shut my bedroom door, and locked it. Then I pulled out the eviction notices and started filling them in. My pen moved steadily across the page. Their names, the address, the date. By the time I was done, my hands no longer trembled. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the word eviction. It sounded harsh, final. But so was betrayal. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. The next morning, I called Mr. Whitman and told him I wanted to move forward. Good, he said simply. Strength doesn't always roar, Claire. Sometimes it's in the quiet act of saying no. While the paperwork processed, I started noticing more and more little signs of their invasion. Jenny had taken down the family photos in the hallway and replaced them with pictures of her kids. Mark had moved his tools into Dad's shed, scattering his belongings like they were nothing. One evening, I found Jenny in the kitchen, talking to a friend on speakerphone. She laughed and said, "Yeah, it's basically ours now. Claire doesn't really use the place, you know?" My blood boiled. I wanted to storm in and scream, but instead, I bit my tongue. Soon enough, her laughter would die in her throat. A week later, the notices were ready. I slipped them into envelopes and held them in my hands, the weight of them like a stone in my chest. I imagined their faces when they opened them, the shock, the anger, the disbelief. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. But I didn't serve them right away.
Not yet.
I wanted the timing to be perfect. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Jenny had invited half the family over for dinner, without even asking me. I came home to the smell of roasted chicken and the sound of clinking glasses. My dining room table was set with my grandmother's china, the same set Dad had always treated like treasure. I stood in the doorway, watching as Jenny laughed with relatives, passing plates like she was queen of the castle. Mark clinked his glass and said, "To family, to new beginnings." The room erupted in cheers, and I felt something cold and sharp cut through my chest. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a takeover. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the hardwood. Conversation stilled. All eyes turned to me. Jenny's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Claire, perfect timing. Come join us." I held the envelopes in my hand, my heart pounding, my voice steady. "Actually, I do have something to share." I laid the eviction notices on the table, one in front of Jenny, one in front of Mark. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark frowned, confused, picking up the paper. Jenny's face drained of color as her eyes scanned the words. Then she looked up at me, her voice shaking with disbelief. "Claire, what is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like," I said coldly. "You've been squatting in my house without permission. You have 30 days to leave." Gasps echoed around the table. Mark's chair scraped loudly as he stood, his face turning red. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," I replied. "Dad left this house to me."
Not you.
"Not anyone else."
Me.
"You've taken advantage of my grief, my silence, and my kindness. But that ends tonight." Jenny's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The laughter that had once filled the room was gone, replaced by stunned silence. For the first time since Dad's funeral, I felt powerful. I felt like his daughter again. And I knew this was only the beginning. Mark's face went red as he slammed the eviction notice onto the table. "You can't be serious, Claire. This is family business. You don't throw blood out into the street." Jenny's eyes filled with tears, though I couldn't tell if they were real or another performance. "Claire," she whispered, voice trembling, "how could you do this to us? We're family. We've been helping you keep this house alive. Do you think you could have done this alone?" I clenched my fists at my sides, willing myself not to scream. "Helping me? You moved yourselves in without permission. You threw parties with my dishes, rearranged my kitchen, and told me to move out of my own home. Don't pretend this is anything other than what it is, you taking advantage. The room buzzed with tension. Relatives looked back and forth between us, unsure of where to stand. Some stared at their plates, pretending not to hear. Others leaned in, hungry for drama. Mark raised his voice, his words sharp enough to cut glass. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of us. We built families, real homes, real lives, and you clung to this house like a child clutching a toy. You don't even know what it means to take care of people. The jab hit its mark. I swallowed hard, heat rushing to my cheeks. For a moment, I wanted to shrink, to run upstairs and lock my door. But then my father's words echoed in my mind. This place is your anchor, Claire. I straightened my shoulders. Maybe I don't have a family like yours, Mark. But that doesn't mean you get to take mine away from me. Dad left this house to me because he knew I would honor it. He didn't trust you with it, and now I see exactly why. The silence that followed was deafening. Jenny's tears dried instantly, her face twisting into something cold and cruel. Fine, she spat. If that's how you want to play it, then don't expect anyone in this family to stand by you. You'll be alone, Claire. Alone in this big, empty house. Her words stung, but I forced myself to meet her gaze. Better alone than surrounded by liars. The dinner ended in chaos. Chairs scraped, voices rose. People hurried out carrying their coats. Some avoided looking at me. Others muttered things under their breath. I stood by the doorway, watching as Mark and Jenny stormed outside, their kids trailing behind them. Mark shouted over his shoulder. You'll regret this, Claire. You can't just erase us. The front door slammed, rattling the frame. And then, for the first time in weeks, the house was quiet. But peace didn't last long. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications, texts, missed calls, emails. Word had spread like wildfire. Relatives were messaging me, demanding explanations. Some accused me of being heartless, of throwing children onto the street. Others begged me to reconsider. And then there were the social media posts. Jenny had taken to Facebook, writing long paragraphs about how I had betrayed family and disrespected her children. She painted herself as the victim, the struggling mother just trying to make a home. The comments flooded in, sympathy, outrage, whispers that I was selfish and cold. Each post felt like another knife in my back. I spent hours scrolling, reading the lies, my stomach twisting tighter and tighter. Friends from town stopped me at the grocery store, asking softly, "Is it true?" I could feel the judgment in their eyes. By the end of the week, I didn't even want to leave the house. Every time I opened the curtains, I imagined neighbors whispering. Every ring of the phone made my heart race. Mark and Jenny weren't just trying to squat in my house, they were trying to destroy my reputation. But what they didn't realize was that I had more than a deed and a will. I had the truth. And the truth had power. That weekend, I invited my aunt, one of the few relatives who had always been kind, to come over. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one Jenny had once claimed as hers. I slid the will across the table. She read it carefully, her lips pursing as her eyes scanned the lines. When she looked up, there was no judgment, only sadness. Claire, this is clear as day. Your father left everything to you. They knew this, didn't they? I nodded. They just thought I wouldn't fight back. Her eyes softened. Then you need to fight, Claire. Because if you don't, they'll take everything your father worked for. And he didn't raise you to be walked over. Her words were the push I needed. On Monday morning, I met with Mr. Whitman again. I handed him screenshots of Jenny's posts, copies of text messages from Mark, and photos I'd taken of their boxes stacked in my house. His jaw tightened as he flipped through the evidence. They've overplayed their hand, he said firmly. This will only strengthen your case if it goes to court. But remember, Claire, sometimes people like this won't go down without a fight.
Are you ready for that?
I hesitated for a moment, then nodded.
Yes.
I'm done being quiet. That night, I sat in my bedroom, lights dim, staring at the eviction notice pinned to my corkboard. For the first time, I didn't feel fear when I looked at it. I felt strength. Downstairs, I could still see the remnants of their invasion. Boxes half unpacked, toys scattered across the floor, family photos Jenny had hung. It was as if they had tried to erase me from my own life. But this was my house. My father's house. And I was done letting them trample it. As I walked through the halls, I ran my fingers along the banister Dad had polished every spring. The wood was worn smooth, familiar, grounding. "I'll protect this," I whispered into the empty air. "I promise." The war had started, and I knew the battles ahead would be ugly. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because this time, I had the law, the will, and my father's memory on my side. And soon enough, Mark and Jenny would realize they'd picked the wrong person to laugh at. The following week was pure hell. Jenny didn't stop at Facebook. She posted on every platform she could: Instagram, Twitter, even community groups. Her captions always painted the same picture: a poor, grieving mother cruelly thrown out of her uncle's home by a selfish cousin. She used photos of her kids playing in the yard, with captions like, "Where will they go now?" And people bought it. I'd walk into the grocery store and hear whispers: "That's her, the one who kicked out her family." I caught neighbors shaking their heads as I walked by. My inbox filled with messages from acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years, accusing me of being heartless. One evening, when I went to take the trash out, I found a note taped to my door in messy handwriting. "You should be ashamed." I stood there in the cool night air, the note trembling in my hands, my heart pounding. For a moment, I thought about ripping it up and breaking down right there on the porch. But instead, I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and reminded myself of what my father would have said: "The truth doesn't need to shout, Claire. It just needs to stand." Still, the attacks hurt. Even within my own family, the divide grew. An aunt messaged me saying, "Couldn't you just let them stay a little longer? Family should come first." My cousin, Jenny's sister, called me cold and bitter. The worst part was my uncle, my dad's own brother, phoning me late one night to shout, "You're tearing this family apart, Claire. Do you think this is what your father would have wanted?" I hung up, tears streaming down my face. Because deep down, I knew my father wouldn't have wanted this war. But he also wouldn't have wanted me bullied out of my own home. That line, that thin balance between protecting myself and honoring him, became my anchor. The smear campaign reached its peak when Jenny showed up at a family barbecue without me knowing. I had avoided these gatherings since the eviction notice, but she used the opportunity to spread her side of the story face to face. "She's cruel," I overheard her telling relatives, tears brimming in her eyes. "We just needed help," and she slammed the door in our faces. Uncle Robert would be rolling in his grave. The crowd murmured in sympathy. Some nodded, others patted her back. My chest tightened when I saw pictures from the barbecue later on social media. Jenny surrounded by family, smiles plastered across their faces, captions like #FamilyFirst. Family first. The words stung like acid. But in the middle of all this noise, a small light appeared. One afternoon, my aunt, the same one who had read the will with me, came by. She carried a casserole dish, like she used to when Mom was alive. She set it down on the counter, then took my hand. "Don't let them break you, Claire," she said quietly. "I know the truth. Your father trusted you, not them. That house is yours because you earned it. Don't let their shouting drown out your strength."
Her words made me realize something.
Jenny and Mark were loud because they were desperate. They needed to twist the story, to paint me as the villain, because deep down they knew the law wasn't on their side. That night, I gathered every piece of evidence I had. Screenshots of Jenny's posts, texts from Mark telling me to move out, photos of their boxes cluttering my rooms, even receipts of the repairs I'd paid for while they lived rent-free. I made copies, organized them into folders, and prepared myself. Because if this went to court, and it would, I wasn't going to walk in as a victim. I was going to walk in as my father's daughter, armed with truth. But the emotional toll was heavy. I'd sit at the kitchen table late at night, the house eerily quiet, staring at the eviction notice on the corkboard. I imagined Dad sitting across from me, sipping his coffee, giving me that calm, steady look. Am I doing the right thing? I whispered to the empty air. Would you be proud of me, or would you think I'm tearing us apart? Silence. Only the hum of the refrigerator answered. But then I'd remember his words, written in his will. For Claire. She kept this home alive when no one else cared. That was my answer. The breaking point came when Mark himself decided to confront me directly. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had just finished weeding the front garden when I saw his truck pull up. He got out, slamming the door, stomping up the driveway with fury in every step. "Claire," he shouted, his voice booming across the yard. Neighbors peeked through blinds. "Do you think you can humiliate us like this? Eviction? Public embarrassment? You're going to regret this." I stood up slowly, dirt on my gloves, sweat beading on my forehead. My heart pounded, but I forced my voice steady. "You brought this on yourself, Mark. You moved into my house without permission. You tried to erase me. And now you're angry because I'm not rolling over." His face twisted with rage. "You're weak. Always have been. You hide behind lawyers and papers. You don't know what family means." I pulled off my gloves, dropped them on the ground, and stepped closer until we were eye to eye.
"No, Mark.
You don't know what family means. Family doesn't invade your home. Family doesn't laugh while stealing what isn't theirs. Family doesn't break someone when they're grieving." For a moment he looked like he might strike me. His fists clenched, his jaw tight. But then, seeing neighbors watching, he spat on the ground, muttered something under his breath, and stormed back to his truck. The tires screeched as he peeled away. I stood in the driveway, my hands trembling, but my chest filled with something I hadn't felt in weeks: strength. Because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving their attacks. I was standing up to them. And soon, in front of a judge, I would finish what they started. The first court date came faster than I expected. When I walked up the courthouse steps that morning, my stomach felt like it was filled with stones. The gray building loomed above me, its columns tall and imposing, as if daring me to falter. I clutched the folder of evidence to my chest. Copies of the will, the deed, screenshots of Jenny's posts, photos of their boxes, and told myself over and over, this isn't just paper. This is truth. This is Dad's voice. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I imagined. The wooden benches creaked as people shuffled in. A faint hum of whispered conversations filled the air. I sat at the table with Mr. Whitman, who placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Let them show who they are." Across the room, Jenny sat with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes red as if she had been crying. Mark leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his jaw set tight. Their lawyer, a slick man in a navy suit, flipped through his notes with a smug expression. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The sound of the gavel echoed like a warning shot. "This hearing is to address the matter of occupancy and ownership regarding the Thompson residence," the judge announced. The lawyer for Mark and Jenny went first. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Your Honor, my clients have been unjustly targeted. They sought only to support their cousin in her time of grief. They moved into the home to help care for the property, to create stability for their children, and now she seeks to throw them out on the street. It is cruel, and it dishonors the spirit of family." Jenny dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Mark shook his head, as though heartbroken by my betrayal. I sat there, fists clenched under the table, wanting to scream. But Mr. Whitman leaned in and whispered, "Wait, let them talk." Their lawyer continued, "We believe Miss Thompson is acting out of spite, motivated by jealousy and bitterness. She has no family of her own, and she is clinging to this house, as if it will fill that void. But family homes should be shared. And it is clear that Robert Thompson, may he rest in peace, would not have wanted his niece to divide the family in such a way." The words made my blood boil. How dare they invoke my father's name? How dare they pretend to know what he wanted? When it was our turn, Mr. Whitman stood slowly, adjusting his glasses. His voice was calm, but every word struck like a hammer. "Your Honor, my client, Claire Thompson, is the sole legal heir to the property in question. Her father's will leaves the home and all assets exclusively to her. I have here the original document, signed and notarized." He held up the folder. The claim that the property is a family home is sentimental at best, but it has no basis in law. He walked forward, placing the will in front of the judge. Furthermore, I have photographs documenting that the cousins moved into the home without permission, against Miss Thompson's explicit wishes. They brought furniture, belongings, and even hosted events in the home, all while attempting to push her out of her rightful residence. I also have evidence of harassment, posts made publicly by Jenny Carter defaming my client and attempting to manipulate public opinion against her. He gestured toward me. Miss Thompson has endured weeks of emotional turmoil, smear campaigns, and invasion of privacy. But she has remained patient. Today, she asks not for vengeance, but for justice, the right to live in her own home without being bullied out of it. The judge flipped through the documents, his brow furrowing. Jenny's lawyer stood to object, but the judge raised his hand. "Sit down." My heart pounded as the judge looked over at me. "Miss Thompson, would you like to speak?" I stood, my knees shaking, my palms clammy. For a moment, my throat locked. But then I picture my father sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching me with that steady look of his, and the words spilled out. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steadying with each word. My father loved this house. He built it, cared for it, and poured his life into it. When my mother died, it was just the two of us, and this house was our anchor. My cousins were not here. They never helped with repairs, never sat with him through lonely nights. But when he died, they saw an opportunity. They moved in without my permission, told me I should leave, and acted like they owned the place. I paused, letting my words sink in. Jenny dabbed her eyes again, but I could see the cracks forming in her performance. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I am not cruel," I continued. "I'm not heartless. But I will not be erased from my own home. My father left it to me for a reason, because he knew I would protect it, and that's what I'm doing." The room was silent. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just defending myself. I was defending my father's legacy. The judge cleared his throat. "I've reviewed the documents. The will is valid, and the deed is clear. Miss Thompson is the sole owner of the property. Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he turned toward my cousins, "you have 30 days to vacate the premises. Failure to do so will result in forcible removal." Jenny gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Mark slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. You can't just throw us out." The judge banged his gavel. "Order. You may not disrupt these proceedings. The matter is settled." The sound echoed through the room, final and sharp. When the hearing ended, I walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight hitting my face like a blessing. My knees were still weak, my body trembling, but inside, a weight had lifted. For weeks, I had been drowning in their lies, their laughter, their invasion. But now the law had spoken. Mr. Whitman patted my shoulder. "You did well, Claire. Your father would have been proud." I smiled faintly, blinking back tears. "Thank you." But I knew it wasn't over yet. Mark and Jenny weren't the kind to leave quietly. I could already picture the storm brewing, the shouting, the threats, the desperate attempts to hold on. As I drove home, I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Let them try, I thought. This house is mine. And no matter what they throw at me next, I won't back down. I thought winning in court would end things. I thought the eviction order would be enough to finally make them pack their boxes and leave with at least a shred of dignity. I was wrong. The very next day, I woke to the sound of shouting outside. When I pulled back the curtain, I saw Mark pacing the front yard, his fists clenched, his voice booming loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "She's heartless," he bellowed. "Throwing kids into the street. You think you're a hero, Claire? Everyone in this neighborhood should know what kind of person you are." His words rang through the still morning air. I felt my throat tighten, my stomach churn. Jenny stood behind him, holding her phone high, recording his performance. I could already picture the caption, "This is what betrayal looks like." For a moment, fear clawed at my chest. Should I call the police? Should I confront him? Instead, I pulled the curtains closed and sat on the edge of my bed, breathing hard. My hands trembled, but beneath the fear was something else. anger. Not just at them, but at myself for letting their noise shake me again. By mid-afternoon, they were gone. But the damage wasn't. Neighbors avoided my eyes. A woman across the street whispered to another, pointing at my house. My sanctuary felt like a stage, and I was the villain in their play. That night, I found another note taped to my door. The handwriting was jagged, messy. "You'll regret this." I held it in my hand for a long time, my chest heavy. Part of me wanted to crumble under the weight of it all. But then I remembered sitting in the courtroom, standing tall, speaking my truth. I remembered the judge's words. The property belongs solely to Miss Thompson.
The truth was mine. They couldn't take that from me.
The harassment didn't stop. Jenny plastered Facebook with long posts, begging for sympathy. Photos of her kids clutching stuffed animals, captions like, "Where will they sleep when their cruel cousin forces us out?" The comments flooded in. How could she? That's not what family does. Mark went further. Late at night, I'd hear his truck rumbling past, headlights flashing across my windows. Sometimes he'd honk, long and loud, just to rattle me. Once, I found trash scattered across my lawn, fast food bags, empty beer cans. It wore me down. I'd lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with every sound outside. My mind replayed his threats. "You'll regret this." I started double-checking the locks, leaving lights on through the night, clutching my father's letter like it was armor. But something inside me shifted too. Each time they lashed out, each time they tried to break me, I realized they weren't as strong as they pretended. They were desperate, and desperation was ugly. One afternoon, I met with Mr. Whitman again, sliding the threats and screenshots across his desk. He frowned, his brow furrowed. "They're digging themselves deeper," he said. "Harassment, intimidation, it won't help them. If they continue, we can press charges. Claire, you need to understand, you're not powerless here." His words sank in. For weeks, I had felt like prey. But I wasn't. I was the homeowner, the legal heir, the one with the truth on my side. They were the intruders, scrambling to hold onto something that was never theirs. When I left his office that day, the air felt lighter. That weekend, I drove to the hardware store and bought new locks, fresh paint, and roses for the garden. My father's garden. As I dug my hands into the soil, planting the roses in neat rows, I felt like I was reclaiming the house piece by piece. Every thorn, every bloom was a reminder. This is mine.
This is ours, Dad.
Of course, Mark and Jenny didn't give up easily. They tried one last trick. A week before the eviction date, Jenny showed up at the door with her kids in tow. She clutched them close, her eyes wide and wet. "Please, Claire," she begged, her voice cracking. "Don't do this. Think of the children. Where will they go?" For a moment, guilt stabbed at me. The kids hadn't asked for this. They were caught in the middle of their parents' greed. But then I saw the way Jenny's eyes flickered, calculating, waiting for me to crack. I steadied my voice. "You should have thought of them before you tried to steal my home." Her tears vanished in an instant, replaced by a glare cold enough to cut. She grabbed her children's hands and stormed off the porch, muttering curses under her breath. That was the last time I saw her before the sheriff came. On the morning of the eviction, Mark's truck was gone. Jenny's car wasn't in the driveway. The sheriff and his deputies walked through the house, checking each room, ensuring the squatters were truly out. The boxes, the toys, the clutter, they were all gone. The silence was overwhelming. I walked from room to room, my footsteps echoing against the walls. The house was mine again. But it didn't feel empty. It felt alive. As I stood in the living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, I whispered, "We did it, Dad." For the first time in months, I felt peace. Not the fragile, temporary peace that came from ignoring the problem, but the deep, steady peace that came from fighting back and winning. It wasn't just about the house anymore.
It was about me.
About learning that strength doesn't mean being unshaken. It means standing even when you're trembling. Mark and Jenny had tried to break me with lies, threats, and noise. But in the end, they were the ones who lost everything. And I had my father's home, my father's memory, and my own hard-earned strength to carry forward. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't suffocating. It was healing. For weeks after the eviction, I walked through each room like I was rediscovering it for the first time. The floors no longer creaked under someone else's weight. The kitchen no longer smelled of food I hadn't cooked. The walls no longer echoed with voices that tried to erase mine. It was my home again, my father's gift, my inheritance, my anchor.
But it wasn't just about the house. It was about me.
When this all began, I was fragile. My father had just died, and I was drowning in grief. Mark and Jenny saw that weakness and pounced. They laughed, they spread lies, they tried to turn the world against me. And for a while they almost won. Almost. But something my father taught me had carried me through. Strength isn't about never breaking, it's about putting yourself back together, piece by piece, until you're stronger than before. I remember sitting on the porch one evening, a glass of wine in hand, the roses I had planted blooming in neat rows at the edge of the yard. The sky was painted in gold and pink, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My aunt came by and sat beside me, her hand warm on mine. "You've been through hell," she said softly. "But you did it, Claire. You stood your ground." I smiled, though tears stung my eyes. I didn't think I could. I thought I'd cave. But every time they pushed, every time they tried to tear me down, I felt Dad beside me. And I couldn't let him down. She squeezed my hand. "He'd be proud of you." Those words meant more than anything. The truth is, this battle wasn't just about legal papers or a house. It was about betrayal and resilience, about discovering that sometimes the worst wounds come from the people who share your blood, and that you can survive them. I learned that family isn't defined by last names or DNA. It's defined by respect, loyalty, and love. And if people can't give you that, then they don't deserve a place in your life, no matter what stories they tell about family first. Mark and Jenny? I haven't heard from them since the eviction. Word around town is they moved 2 counties over, trying to rebuild their reputation. Part of me still aches for the kids. They were innocent in all of this. But as for Mark and Jenny themselves, I don't carry hatred anymore. I don't need to. They lost the war they started. And I won, not just with the deed in my hand, but with the strength I found in myself.
I took steps to rebuild my peace.
I repainted the walls they had scuffed, rehung the photos they'd taken down. I filled the rooms with flowers and light, with laughter when friends came over. Slowly, the house stopped feeling like a battleground and started feeling like home again. And I didn't stop there. I created a scholarship fund in my father's name, something he had always dreamed of, but never had the chance to do. The first recipient was a quiet, hard-working student who reminded me of myself at that age, someone overlooked, someone underestimated, but brimming with determination. Handing her that check, seeing the tears in her eyes, I knew I was carrying forward Dad's legacy in the best way I could. The night after, I sat in the living room, the will and deed spread out on the coffee table. I read my father's words again. For Claire. She kept this home alive when no one else cared. Tears blurred my vision, but this time they weren't from grief. They were from pride. Because I realized something. He hadn't just left me a house. He had left me a lesson. That you don't let people take from you what you've earned, what you've protected, what you love. That you stand even when standing feels impossible. And that's what I want anyone listening to my story to know. Betrayal will come. Sometimes from friends, sometimes from family. It will cut you in ways you didn't think possible. But betrayal doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. I was laughed at, belittled, painted as a villain. But in the end, I held my ground. I fought with the truth. And I walked away not just with a house, but with my dignity intact. So if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever been pushed aside, remember this. You are stronger than you know. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't anger, it's peace. Now, when I sit at my dining room table, the same one where Jenny once played hostess to a family she tried to steal, I feel nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength I discovered, and for the father who trusted me enough to leave me the anchor of our lives. As I run my fingers along the polished wood, I whisper into the quiet house, "I kept it safe, Dad, just like you knew I would." And for the first time, I believe he hears me.